The moment ESPN and the WNBA announced record finals viewership, sharp-eyed fans started asking questions, and the answers didn't hold up. It turns out those ratings were padded by counting anyone who happened to glance at a screen in a public place. This wasn't a victory, it was a facade. While empty seats told one story, the league tried to sell another, relying on obscure data tweaks instead of organic fan interest.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The result? A backlash that's now harder to ignore than the finals themselves. What the WNBA hoped would be seen as growth now reads like desperation. Instead of building off Caitlin Clark's momentum with real storytelling and competition, the league leaned into optics and shortcuts. That move didn't just fall flat, it revealed a structural weakness. The WNBA's credibility took a hit, not because the numbers changed, but because the league assumed no one would notice how empty the engagement really was. The WNBA just got caught red-handed. What was supposed to be a victory lap turned into a public embarrassment, and now the league is dealing with the fallout. All because they tried to pass off inflated numbers as a sign of real growth, and people noticed. It started when the WNBA and ESPN proudly announced that the 2025 finals had achieved the highest ratings in nearly 3 decades. Big claim. Huge headlines. But within days, fans and analysts were tearing it apart. Not because they were rooting for failure, but because the numbers didn't match the reality they saw on the ground. There was no buzz, no trending clips, no viral moments, no media frenzy, just a quiet, underwhelming championship series being sold as a groundbreaking moment for women's sports. It didn't make sense until people dug into how those numbers were actually counted. Nielsen had recently changed their rating methodology. They introduced something called the Big Data Plus panel, which combines traditional measurement with out-of-home viewing estimates. Sound harmless, but here's the kicker. This method counts people who weren't actively watching the game. If you walked by a TV in a bar, passed a screen at the gym, or waited near a monitor in an airport, you were counted. Even if you didn't stop, even if you had no idea the game was on, just being in the vicinity of a screen was enough. That's not viewership, that's proximity. Suddenly, the record-breaking numbers made sense. Because they weren't rooted in people sitting down to watch the finals. They were padded with incidental glances and background noise. ESPN and the WNBA didn't lie outright, but they leaned heavily on a system that favors impressions over intention. And when that data was presented without context, it felt misleading. Because it was. This all could have been avoided if they'd simply disclosed how the numbers were being calculated. But they didn't. Instead, they ran with the headline, most watched finals in 27 years. No mention of methodology. No clarification. Just spin. And that's where it all started to unravel. Because if this finals was truly a breakthrough moment, where was the excitement? Where were the sold-out arenas? The post-game debates? The media saturation? The cultural footprint was non-existent. People weren't talking about the games. They weren't sharing clips or buying jerseys. It felt like any other week in the season, maybe quieter. Meanwhile, the only real ratings spike the WNBA had seen all year came from Caitlin Clark. Her playoff games drew real viewers, millions of them, and not because of out-of-home estimates. These were engaged fans tuning in from their homes, following the storyline, and driving genuine interest. Her impact was measurable, visible, and authentic. Her presence proved that people will absolutely show up for women's basketball. But instead of building on that, the league tried to apply that same success to the entire product. They pretended Clark-level attention was league-wide when the data said otherwise. That's the heart of the controversy, trying to mask stagnation with a star. Caitlin Clark brought in a new wave of fans, and the league needed her. But outside of her orbit, the numbers weren't growing. They were holding steady, or in some cases, shrinking. So when the WNBA tried to sell this year's finals as a massive win, it looked like they were trying to cover up that fragile reality. And fans caught on. Fast. The backlash started with skepticism. People began asking how viewership could be up when engagement was so obviously down. There are no trending hashtags, No debate shows doing segments, no public enthusiasm. The numbers felt disconnected from reality. So analysts started digging, and what they found was damning. Games were cherry-picked. Metrics were cherry-picked. And the numbers being promoted were often peak ratings, not averages. In some cases, networks focused on the most favorable 15-minute stretches to make the games appear more popular than they were. On top of that, the use of out-of-home viewers ballooned the totals by counting people who were never truly watching in the first place. It all added up to a mess. A manufactured success story that didn't hold up under scrutiny. And the credibility issue? That's the part that stings. Because once fans feel manipulated, it's hard to win them back. Trust in the numbers is essential. It's how networks sell ad space. It's how leagues gauge momentum. And most importantly, it's how fans and media measure interest. When that trust is broken, every future claim gets questioned. That's exactly what's happening now. Fans don't know what to believe, and analysts are going to dissect every future press release for signs of spin. And then there's the ESPN factor. As both the broadcaster and business partner of the WNBA, ESPN had a vested interest in making the league look good. So when they parroted these record ratings without context, it wasn't just bad journalism. It was a conflict of interest. They were reporting on their own investment. And when things got called out, they went silent. No correction, no clarification, no accountability. That silence only confirmed what people suspected. This wasn't an honest mistake. It was strategy. Inflate the numbers, sell the story, and hope no one asks questions. But they did. Because sports fans, especially the ones rooting for women's leagues to succeed, aren't naive. They want real progress, not inflated stats and fake victories. And speaking of progress, let's talk about what Caitlin Clark's success actually revealed. When Clark played, fans showed up. Ratings spiked. Engagement soared. Her impact wasn't manufactured. It was earned. And the contrast between her games and the finals made one thing painfully clear. The WNBA isn't growing uniformly. It's leaning heavily on a few standout players, and without them, the product struggles. That's not a knock on the athletes. It's a reality check for the league. The path forward isn't complicated. Stop inflating metrics to chase headlines. Invest in building rivalries. Promote more players. Improve accessibility and storytelling. Create moments that actually resonate with fans, not just Nielsen software. Because if the league continues down this path, masking its fragile foundation with data tricks and vague press releases, it's going to lose the trust of the very people it needs most. Real fans don't care about padded numbers. They care about compelling games, authentic stars, and a league that respects their intelligence. This controversy exposed a desperate attempt to appear bigger than reality. And that desperation has a cost. Every time the WNBA misleads fans about its popularity, it chips away at the genuine momentum it could be building. The irony is that this could have been a turning point. A rookie sensation like Clark brought real attention to the league. But instead of doubling down on what was working, they try to make it look like everything was working. And now, the narrative has shifted from growth to damage control. People don't trust the ratings. They don't trust the spin. And they're wondering what else isn't being disclosed. So here we are, months after the finals, and the biggest headline isn't about a thrilling championship or an iconic performance. It's about a league getting caught trying to fake a milestone. That's not growth. That's a red flag. If the WNBA wants to recover from this, it has to start being honest with its fans, its partners, and itself. No more cherry-picked data. No more proximity-based viewership spin. Just the truth. Because real success doesn't come from manipulating numbers. It comes from building something people care about. If you've made it this far, you probably care too. So hit that like button, drop a comment if you spotted the spin before the headlines broke, and subscribe for more brutally honest breakdowns of sports media chaos. Because the drama? It's just getting started. So here's where it all lands. A league that desperately wants to be taken seriously just tripped over its own shoelaces, trying to sell a fantasy. The WNBA had a golden opportunity. The spotlight was there. Thanks to Caitlin Clark, more people were paying attention than ever before. Not because they were tricked into watching. Not because the TV was playing in the background while they ordered fries. but because they cared. They showed up. They tuned in. They shared her highlights. Her games sparked real conversations in places that had never even mentioned the WNBA before. And what did the league do with that moment? They inflated their finals ratings using a new Nielsen measurement system that included passive, out-of-home viewers, people who didn't even know they were being counted. They handed out press releases claiming a historic spike in viewership, and ESPN, with a business stake in the league, parroted those numbers without context. No explanation about the methodology shift. No footnotes. Just bold headlines and exaggerated declarations of growth. It wasn't just misleading. It was strategic misrepresentation. And now the backlash isn't just coming from critics. It's coming from actual fans. People who support the WNBA but don't appreciate being misled. The trust that was slowly being built, it's been compromised. Because when you fake success to that degree, it sends one message loud and clear. You don't believe the real numbers are good enough. That's a brutal look for a league already fighting for cultural legitimacy. And while the spin machine tried to keep things moving, the questions only got louder. Why wasn't there more social media engagement if the finals were such a hit? Why weren't there post-game debates lighting up talk shows? Where were the sold-out arenas? The water cooler moments? The replays? The silence said more than the press releases ever could. Even casual observers could see the truth. Clark's playoff games were drawing more genuine interest than the finals themselves. And yet, the league buried that reality under a mountain of inflated metrics, acting like the finals had single-handedly launched them into a new era of dominance. But numbers without context are just noise. And once you lose control of the narrative, it doesn't matter how many graphics you post or how many stats you tweet. The story tells itself, and this one was built on shaky ground. The most revealing part? The way ESPN handled the whole situation. You'd think a journalism-driven network would address the growing skepticism, offer transparency, acknowledge the nuance. But no, they stood by the narrative because they had to. They were too deep in it. Their reputation was tied to the league's success, and challenging the numbers meant challenging their own role in shaping them. That's the conflict of interest nobody wants to talk about. When a broadcaster is also a financial partner, it doesn't just blur the lines, it erases them. Objectivity gets tossed, and suddenly, your sports desk is doubling as your PR team. The result? A credibility crisis, not just for the WNBA, but for ESPN as well. Now let's zoom out. The problem here isn't that out-of-home viewers shouldn't be counted at all. It's that they shouldn't be equated with intentional, in-home viewership. It's one thing to say, our reach extended into more spaces than ever. It's another to imply that someone walking past a gym TV is the same as a fan sitting down to watch all 4 quarters. Those two audiences are not equal. And when you pretend they are, you insult both. The fans who do care feel used. The ones who might care see through the exaggeration. And the sponsors, the ones who are supposed to put real money behind these numbers, they start asking tougher questions. Because when engagement feels artificially pumped, nobody wants to be the brand left holding the bag. That's the danger in all of this. Faking a moment might get you through one news cycle, but it won't build long-term sustainability. And this entire situation exposed how fragile the WNBA's perceived success really is. It showed that the league is still leaning almost entirely on a handful of stars. That without Caitlin Clark, the attention dips. The energy disappears. And instead of owning that reality and building around it, they try to act like the whole league was rising at the same speed. It's not. And the gap is too obvious to cover up with marketing language and measurement tricks. Even worse, this scandal took focus away from the actual progress that has been happening. Clark's arrival brought in new fans. That wasn't a fluke. That was earned. She shifted the narrative, pulled in casuals, and brought a college fan base that was already invested in her story. She was doing the heavy lifting the league had been waiting for. And instead of putting everything into building on that foundation, highlighting rivalries, amplifying personalities, expanding the drama, they diluted her impact by pretending the finals were just as magnetic. That undermines her contribution and oversells the rest of the product. Growth can't be forced. It can't be photoshopped into existence. It has to be nurtured. That means being honest when the numbers aren't what you hoped. It means highlighting real wins instead of fabricating fake ones. And it means trusting fans enough to let them see the journey, not just the highlight reel. Because make no mistake, this controversy will be remembered. Every time the league announces new ratings, people are going to ask, how are they counted? Are these real fans or passive glances? Are we talking engagement or exposure? The trust is gone, and rebuilding it won't happen overnight. The sad part is that it never had to come to this. There was a real story here, one of transformative rookie, of growing interest, of slowly shifting tides in women's sports. That story was strong enough to stand on its own. But by chasing a shortcut, the league missed a chance to earn its moment. And that's what makes this instant karma so fitting. Because the WNBA tried to tell the world it had already arrived. The world looked around, saw empty seats and lukewarm buzz, and said, not yet. Now they're left with questions instead of momentum, doubt instead of celebration, and the uncomfortable realization that credibility, once lost, is hard to get back. But the path forward isn't impossible. It just requires a hard reset. Stop inflating the numbers. Stop overselling the product. Focus on what is working and put everything behind it. Lean into the stars who actually draw. Build around them without pretending that every matchup is a marquee event. And most importantly, start telling the truth. Because fans don't need every headline to be historic. They need the story to be real. That's how you build a legacy. At the center of all this chaos sits one uncomfortable truth. The WNBA tried to fake a moment, and it backfired. It wasn't just the league's integrity that took a hit. It was the entire system supporting it. ESPN, Nielsen, and the WNBA all stood on the same stage, declaring a victory they didn't fully earn. And when the confetti settled and the scrutiny began, they looked exposed, not celebrated. Because here's what actually happened. A rookie star, Caitlin Clark, lit a spark in a league that had long struggled for mainstream relevance. Her games were electric. Her presence brought in authentic viewers, millions of them. She didn't just show up and boost ratings. She shifted the conversation entirely. She was the conversation, and the league should have focused on that. Should have built a campaign around her emergence, embraced her visibility, used it as a real foundation for future growth. Instead, they took a shortcut. They used a change in Nielsen's measurement methodology, a system that now includes people just being near a TV in a bar, airport, or gym, and called it proof of a historic finals. That's not spin. That's misrepresentation, especially when the numbers were being pitched without clarification, without context, and without acknowledging that out-of-home viewers aren't the same as engaged fans. That's the part that really stings. It didn't have to be this way. Because Clark's presence was proof that interest in women's basketball is real when the product connects. That fans will absolutely show up when there's a compelling reason to care. But the league's reaction to that success was to inflate everything else. Like one good test score meant the whole class should get an A. It sent a message loud and clear. We don't believe our finals can stand on their own, so we're going to pad the numbers until it looks like they did. And the people watching? They noticed. Because if the finals were really a record-breaking moment, why didn't they feel like one? Why weren't people talking about the games? Why weren't the players trending? Where were the moments? Where was the magic? It wasn't there. Because the games didn't have the same energy or interest. And you can't manufacture that through data tweaks. Even worse, when critics and analysts started asking questions, when they started comparing these historic finals numbers to Clark's actual viewership metrics, the gaps became too big to ignore. Caitlin Clark's playoff games easily outdrew the finals. Her early round matchups generated more genuine interest than the championship series itself. And yet, that wasn't the headline. Instead, the league and its media partners tried to pretend that everything was rising together, that the finals were just as magnetic as Clark, that the growth was league-wide. It wasn't. And the attempt to paint it that way made the league look insecure, like it didn't trust fans to embrace the truth. That's not just a PR problem. That's a credibility crisis. And when your credibility starts slipping, everything becomes harder. Sponsorships get more cautious. Media coverage gets more skeptical. Even loyal fans start asking harder questions. Because if you're willing to inflate viewership now, what else are you spinning? And let's be honest, this wasn't just about the WNBA. This mess exposed the entire structure propping up the numbers. Nielsen's new measurement system, Big Data Plus Panel, was introduced to keep up with modern media habits. On paper, it sounds fair: track more viewing environments, expand the footprint, give advertisers a bigger picture. But when that data is used to count someone walking past a muted TV in a waiting room as a viewer, it crosses a line. It stops being meaningful. It stops being real. And yet, that's what ESPN and the WNBA ran with. No disclaimers. No nuance. Just highest viewership in 27 years blasted across headlines. The whole thing was a house of cards. And when fans and media started pulling at the edges, it all came down. Which brings us to now. A league that had a real shot at shifting the narrative is suddenly backpedaling. The trust built over the last year, through real stars, real moments, and real fans, is now overshadowed by a ratings stunt that nobody bought. And the worst part? The WNBA didn't need to do this. Caitlin Clark's rise was already giving them legitimacy. Real buzz, actual attention. But instead of building around that and trusting that the product would evolve naturally, they tried to skip the line. They wanted the finals to look like a cultural event, even if they hadn't earned that moment yet. But perception can't be faked forever. When the metrics say one thing and the energy says another, fans start to trust their instincts, not the numbers. They stop believing the press releases. They stop repeating the talking points. And eventually, they stop showing up altogether. That's why this isn't just a scandal, it's a warning. If the league continues down this road, masking weak engagement with technical tricks, relying on one superstar to carry the narrative, avoiding transparency whenever the numbers are soft, it won't just stall growth. It'll reverse it, because sports fans don't like being lied to. They want authenticity. They want transparency. They want a product that means something. And they're willing to support it, if it's honest. There's still time to fix it. But that starts with acknowledging what went wrong. Start telling the truth about how viewership is measured. Stop treating incidental exposure like it's earned engagement. Lean into the players who are actually moving the needle. And most of all, stop being afraid to admit when something didn't break records. It's okay to not be there yet. What's not okay is pretending you are, because this time, fans were watching. Not the finals, not the spin, but you. And they saw everything. If you're one of those fans who saw right through the noise, hit that like button. Subscribe for more breakdowns on media drama and marketing disasters. And drop a comment. Did you believe the finals hype? Or did it feel like someone was cooking the numbers while no one was really watching? Either way, we'll be here, ready to call out, because real stories don't need fake stats.